Hey folks, Aaron Beyer with Gleaner Combines, and I'd like to welcome you to the next episode of the AGCO Parts Walkaround series. Today we're going to take a look at the Gleaner T Series and review some of the parts as a new owner that you're going to need to pay attention to during harvest. And we're also going to take a look at some of the field installed kits that are going to increase your performance and make your job a little easier. All of these kits and parts are available at parts.agcocorp.com or at your local dealer. So we'll start with the feeder house. So at the front, we're going to first talk about our feed chain. All Gleaner combines come standard with a 4-strand feed chain. The thing that you want to check out when you're looking at the feed chain is these slats. So each of these slats is connecting, there's 3 sets on each section, connecting each of the 4 strands together. Now this is what's actively, positively engaging the crop mat as it's entering into the feeder. Now our wear edge is going to be this front edge, and that's what you're going to want to check out. So you can see here on this worn piece, as that wears down, you're going to see it start to knife edge a little bit. It's going to wear that front leading edge off, and what that's going to result in is lower capacity because it's not positively engaging the crop mat and moving it into the processor. The other thing that's important to know is to have it properly tensioned. We're going to talk about where we tension that a little later, but to make sure this is tensioned correctly and to have that first, you're going to make sure that they're all equal. And then when you run out of that tension, you'll notice that each of the front and the rear feed chain on this machine, you're going to have a half link that you can remove and extend the life of that feed chain. If you run out of that adjustment again, it's time to replace that 4-strand feed chain. And again, replace the whole. You don't want to just replace one individual chain, because if you have one stretched and the other at a different lengths, it's going to cause tracking issues and it's going to jump sprockets on the backside on the drive. The other thing to point out while we're here is that we do have 3 daily lubrications for our lateral tilt. Our lateral tilt mechanism moves back and forth when we're using our smart track or auto tilt functionality, so we need to make sure that's well lubricated. So again, there's a daily Zerk on the top 2 and then our pivot pin on the bottom to make sure that that's well lubricated. We're going to do that every day. So from here, let's go ahead and move over to the right-hand side of the feeder house. So on the right-hand side of the feeder house, there's a few components to check out as well. So first off, starting front to back, we have over here on the right-hand side, this is our feeder, our front feeder drive belt. We're going to make sure that's tensioned correctly using the gauge here. So it's always a good idea to go ahead and put hands on it, make sure the belt's in good condition, no excessive rubbing in any areas, make sure the ribs are well attached, and make sure the back isn't delaminating or anything like that. The other thing over here on the right-hand side is you're going to see that we have our tensioner for our front feeder. We're going to make sure that spring is to the end of the spring gauge and to make sure it's properly tensioned. If you see this bolt positioned all the way to the front and you're out of tension, that's when we're going to go ahead and remove that half link and extend the life of that chain. Now if you look here on the back, you can see that there is an overrun clutch that's on our feeder drive or our through shaft or our pivot shaft back here. We're going to make sure we lubricate that every 50 hours. And again, if we have any kind of obstruction or anything that gets in that feeder, that's the slip clutch that's going to overrun. So before we take the shield off here on the left-hand side of the feeder house, I wanted to point out these tubes that are kind of dangling from the bottom side of the cab. What these are the condensation tubes that are coming from our HVAC system. What these duct bills are designed to do is hold a little column of air above them. And if these aren't sealed, you're going to see kind of dripping coming from the vents and create a real big issue up there. So on our inspections, as we're looking around these machines, we need to make sure that you've got a nice tight seal on the duct bill and that it's holding that small column of water above that valve. So over here on the left-hand side of the feeder house, you can see our header drive. And again, when we're doing our inspections, we're going to walk around and make sure the belt is in good conditions. We don't see any hot spots where it might have slipped and compromised the material of the belt. And we're going to take a look at the backside too to make sure it's not delaminating. The other thing we're going to look at here is on the driven sheave. We need to lubricate this daily, whether it's on a corn head or on the Dynaflex. And the reason that is because this sheave needs to be well lubricated to be able to grip this belt and prevent any slipping when we hit those hard conditions or really pull down on that. Now these torque ramps are connected both to the inside sheave and to the shaft. And when the resistance to rotation occurs because of that heavier load on the header, you're gonna see these torque ramps are gonna squeeze and in conjunction, squeeze the belt to tighten the grip on it. Once it tightens the grip, that prevents the slip. So if we don't lubricate these well, what'll tend to happen is you'll see that it'll start to wear a groove inside and we start to slip that belt. There's going to be 2 Zerks on the outside and 2 Zerks on the inside. The other thing to point out, over here on the left-hand side, we also have that tensioner for the front feed chain that we had on the right-hand side. Again, we're going to make sure we're tensioned correctly by having the spring at the end of the spring gauge and making sure that that bolt isn't in the full forward position to show or indicate that that chain is stretched and it's time to replace it. So back here at the back side of the feeder house, both on the left and right-hand side, we have another daily lubrication point, and that's for the feeder house pivot. What we're lubricating here is at the actual point where the feeder house is going up and down. Again, you're going to do this daily because that feeder house is moving up and down when you're using your automatic header height control. The good indication this hasn't been done in a while is if you get a machine, you're raising the feeder house up and down, you kind of hear a popping noise as it's going up and down. So again, these are a daily lubrication point and really critical during the harvest to making sure we're hitting that with some good high quality grease from AGCO parts. So the next point I wanted to talk about on our Gleaner T Series combines is our flange or our bolts that are holding the wheel on. Now it's important to remember that we need to re-torque these after the first 10 hours of operation or after we've put the wheel on, if we've dropped it off for service or for transport or any reason. We need to make sure we come in here and re-torque them according to the decal here or inside the operator manual. The other point to remember is that we need to torque it after every 10 hours of operation until they hold torque. So the other point to make here is also to make sure that we're using the correct tire pressure. These tires are designed to operate at a specific pressure to be able to operate the cyclical loads of unloading and loading the grain tank. So we'll continue down the left-hand side of the machine with our unloading auger. Now a couple points to make on this is that we do have some daily grease zerks on here, grease fittings. There's around the swivel itself. So we're going to use those, grease those, swing the unloading auger in and out, again, to spread that grease throughout those ball bearings that are located inside of that. There's also one up on top on the ball joint for the cylinder, the hydraulic cylinder that moves the unloading auger. There's also a daily Zerk here for the bushing that holds the cross auger, drag auger across as well. You're going to hit that as a daily, and then there's one at the end of the unloading auger you're going to hit when it's down in the cradle. The other point to make is that there is also a grease fitting on the U-joint located inside the swivel of the unloading auger. So on the left-hand side, let's go ahead and open up the shield here on the left, and let's see what's on the inside here. With the shield removed, we have a good opportunity to see some of the components that we updated on the T Series with the DuraDrive ground drive system. To better help illustrate those components, we went ahead and removed a transmission for you. So over here on the left-hand side of the transmission, you can see our fill reservoir. You're going to use the 2 gauges or the 2 lines on the side of the fill reservoir to make sure it's at the proper level. You're going to fill that with the AGCO approved lubrication. On the back side of the transmission, you're going to have a filter element that you're going to replace after the first 50 hours of operation and then at a regular service interval afterwards. Check your operator manual or your service technical publications to be able to get that interval. So over on the right-hand side, we have a suction screen that's going to be serviced at that regular interval according to the operator manual. So at each end of the front axle, you're going to find our final drives that we've also updated. So on the inside of each final drive, you're going to find 2 plugs. You're going to use the bottom of the 2 plugs to be able to check to make sure that the lubrication inside the final drives is at the correct level. Again, you're going to use that AGCO approved lubrication and fill that to the correct level. So as we follow the power from the engine through the drives here on the left-hand side, we've got our main drive that comes from the engine sheave on the PTO of the engine down to our main drive. This is what passes power from the left hand over to the right hand side of the combine. Now a couple points that we can make here. Again, we're going to inspect the belt, but also when we're done at the end of the season, if this has been running for a couple years, it's a good idea to go ahead and take any tension off the belts and roll some of these shafts by hand and kind of listen to those bearings to see if those bearings are still in good shape and if there's any kind of growling or any kind of play in those bearings to see if it's working correctly. On the main shaft, we have 2 clutches. These are our separator clutches. They're going to be magnetized and engaged anytime we engage the processor. It's a good idea to go ahead and put hands on that to make sure that you've got play in there. Same way with our unloading auger clutch. You can see that there's play there. That way when we disengage the unloading auger, that this releases and allows that shaft to spin freely. There's a similar clutch on the front for our header clutch that's going to engage when we engage the header and the feeder drives. The other point to make is each one of those 3 clutches has a brush holder. The really nice point is it is the same brush holder part number for all 3. That way you have one brush holder for all 3 of those components. Now on the DEF tank itself, we have a couple components that we're going to service and maintain. First off, on the front here, this is our DEF supply module. So inside of this module, you're going to have a filter element that you're going to replace periodically, and then 2 inline screens that you're going to either keep clean or replace when you're servicing it. On the top is a breather. You're going to make sure this breather is able to pass air easily, because if we have any problems with this breather, you're going to create a vacuum inside this tank when that DEF level drops and starts to lower. So make sure that's clean to make sure we don't have any kind of DEF issues going into the future. So let's move to the back of the machine and talk a little bit about the cleaning shoe. So before we talk about the cleaning shoe, let's go ahead and swing this chaff spreader out of the way. So for our cleaning screen options, we have our 3 options for the chaffer. We have the standard all-crop chaffer, or the factory installed or field optioned long tooth round end chaffer that you're going to use for higher capacity crops, corn and higher yielding soybeans. We also have the field installed kit, which is a square end deep groove chaffer that you're going to use for higher capacity, but if you need a little bit better bin sample as well. So below that is our sieve. We have 1 option for sieve for all different crops. So you're just going to adjust the sieve. The only configuration you're going to have is the chaffer with those 3 different options. If you look up inside here, at the front of the shoe you can see our perforated cascade pan. Now we do have a field installed kit that you can put a solid cascade pan in there if you're doing a majority small grains or canola. That's going to help your bin sample and still not cut down on your capacity of your shoe. So let's hop up inside the engine compartment and see what we can find in there. So one of the components that you'll notice that has changed with the DuraDrive ground drive system is our hydraulic reservoir. First off, you can see it looks different. And the second thing you'll notice is there isn't any hydraulic oil in the reservoir, or at least not on the indicator. Well, the truth of the matter is our unloading auger is swung out, our feeder house is in the raised position, which means it's used a large volume of the oil that's supposed to be inside this reservoir. So it's a good reminder to make sure that we're checking the hydraulic oil level when the unloading auger is swung in and the feeder house is in the down position. The other thing you'll notice is that we've moved the return filter from the right-hand rear corner below the rotary screen and integrated it into the hydraulic reservoir. That has made the process of servicing that filter cleaner and easier. So check the intervals in the operator manual and make sure you're using AGCO approved lubricants inside this hydraulic reservoir. Let's take a look at the back of the engine and see what else we can find. So the first thing you'll notice that when you look at the backside here underneath the shields is that charge filter that used to sit here behind the engine has moved. It's now in this aluminum canister here over to the left-hand side. We've improved this again to increase the access here, and it's a better filter. We have higher filtration with the DuraDrive ground drive system on the hydraulic oil. So down here you can see our engine oil filter. And then up above, you can see our engine oil fill. Again, we're going to use that approved, AGCO specified engine oil. So the last thing we're going to point out on the back side of the engine is our engine coolant reservoir here on the right-hand side. We're going to use AGCO coolant, and we're going to make sure that it's between the minimum and maximum levels. Let's go ahead and go to the front side of the engine now. So on the front side of the engine here is our engine oil dipstick. You're going to make sure that you catch oil in both the little notches on the end of the dipstick. So on the front side here, we also have our air filter, our primary and secondary air filter, and on top here, our pre-cleaner. A few things that you want to check. First off is to make sure this seal here is making good positive contact with the engine hood. Again, that's sealing that material out. The second thing you want to check is to make sure the aspirator hose, which is on the front side here, doesn't have any holes in it, and that the aspirator on the right-hand side of the machine or the back side of the engine, that you're going to see that is working correctly. The last thing you want to see is to make sure that the top, the air hood inlet across the top of the hood, it's properly sealed and you don't have material falling into that as well. For our fuel filtration, we have 3 filters. We have the water separator or pre-filter that's located underneath the step, and then we have the 2 fuel filters that are located on the engine. It's the pre-filter and the primary filter. You're going to want to change those all at once, that way you get good long service life at the correct intervals for each one of those. So inside the processor here, there's a few components that we need to check for any kind of wear. So first off, you can see that we have our 4 concave sections inside our concave hanger. Now you're going to want to make sure that that wear surface on the front edge is good, nice, and even. It is chrome for longer life, but we need to still make sure we check that periodically. So on the rotor itself, we also have our threshing elements. We have 2 different types of threshing elements. We have the long bars, which are located in the separation area right across here, and then we have the shorter variety, the 3 bolts that are in the concave or threshing area right here. Now, we want to make sure we check these for any excessive wear, because if you really think about it, if this gets excessively worn to where it doesn't have these ribs here, then you're not going to move that material through the processor as evenly and consistently, and that's going to have some negative effects as far as capacity of the machine. Now, the other component that you have inside of here are our helicals. Now, the helicals are located inside the cage on the inside. It's going to keep that material moving in a cylindrical or around that whole rotor as it's moving through here. These again can wear and cause issues as far as throughput or loss, rotor loss as well. So finally, across the bottom here, we have our 2 distribution augers. Again, that's moving the material evenly across our 2 accelerator rolls. Now on those accelerator rolls, there's lugs that we use to be able to propel that grain, throw that grain through that first stream of air to do that initial cleaning. Now those are a wear item. So you can see here on these, we've got a nice deep groove on them. As those wear, what you're going to see is those grooves start to disappear. So when these start to smooth out, what you're going to see, what you're going to have happen is that grain isn't going to be able to reach the velocity it needs to be able to get through that first stream of air. The subsequent disadvantage of that now is that that grain gets blown out the back. So if you're starting to see excessive shoe loss, or if you see that these ribs are starting to disappear, it's time to get a new set of these accelerator roll lugs. So after that material has moved through the processor, through the rotor, it's going to be passed to the chopper. Now we have the 24 blade high-speed chopper, the fine cut 2 chopper that's there. We can flip those. There are 2 sides to that to be able to extend the life of the knife. Those knives are another wear point that we need to check periodically. To finish off the engine, you'll notice that the oil drain is located on the right-hand side of the machine forward of the rear tire. So again, if you're going to change that oil, change the filter, you're going to drain the oil from that location. So next, let's go ahead and open up the right-hand side of the machine to really show you the level of access, the maximum access shielding gets you from the T Series combine. So starting from back to front here, we're going to first talk about our 3 batteries here, our field start batteries. You can easily remove and replace those here. The big important part of it is making sure that we're cleaning the material off the top of those batteries throughout the day. So moving backwards here, you can see our rotary screen. We've got our cooling package here. We've got a few new components and some of the other familiar components. We have, of course, our combo cooler here, which cools our hydraulic oil and our air conditioning. It's our condenser. Up above here, you have your charged air cooler and your radiator, and then your fuel cooler. And the new addition that's included with the DuraDrive ground drive system is this transmission cooler that's located up top. You'll also notice that there's a slinger that's located inside of here that's going to spin when the engine's running. So there's another thing inside of this rotary screen that I like to point out, and that there's a belt drive with a grease fitting. We need to make sure we apply grease to that fitting for the idler, make sure it moves freely, and check the condition of that belt. The other thing that we've got in here are some seals. If you tend to notice that there's a lot of material that builds up on the outside of our rotary screen, typically it's because those seals are either worn or not adjusted correctly to be able to drop that vacuum off and allow that material to fall off when it passes along the bottom side of the rotary screen. So as we move forward here, you can see, again, the whole right-hand side of the machine. And if we're following our power through the machine, you're going to have the right-hand side of the main shaft drive. Now this main shaft, again, is providing the power to the whole right-hand side of the machine and all the belt drives. First off, we have our separator drive here that's powering the accelerator rolls and in turn the distribution augers, and it's also powering our fan down here. Now again, it's a 3-rib belt, so we need to make sure it's in good condition. And then additionally, we have our cylinder drive. Now again, we're adjusting the speed of the rotor here. And if you look in the driven sheave, it's a very similar setup as what we had on the variable speed header drive. We have torque ramps that we need to make sure are well greased. And again, we need to adjust that speed to be able to evenly distribute that grease throughout the sheave. So after you've lubricated the rotor drive driven sheave, it's a good idea to hop up here and check the oil level in the rotor drive gearbox. You'll find the elbow on the back side of the rotor drive gearbox. What you want to do is make sure that the oil level is on the top of the horizontal portion of that elbow. You're going to use a zip tie or a piece of wire to make sure that oil level is at the top of the horizontal portion of the elbow. So from that separator drive, we provide power that goes up to our elevator jack shaft drive, which in turn then powers our return elevator and our clean grain elevator. So talking about our elevators, both of the tensions for the chains are adjusted down here from the ground. Pretty easy, 4 nuts that we loosen and apply a little pressure to the chain. Now the way we know it's adjusted correctly is when we take our chain, we can move it back and forth easily, but we can't pull it away from this bottom sprocket. If we get to the point to where we run out of adjustment here and we need to remove a half link, both our return and our clean grain elevator chains both include a half link that we can remove. But again, if we still run out of that adjustment, it's time to replace the chain and the paddles. So moving forward to the front of the machine, coming off of that front pivot shaft, you can see that we have our rear feed chain drive. So this is driving that secondary feed chain. We have the front feed chain that's inside the feeder house, and we have the second feed chain that's feeding material directly into the rotor. Again, it's got a spring gauge to put the end of the spring to the end of that gauge. So the other thing you can see here is our cog belt for our unloading auger. Finally, as far as our drives are concerned, we do have the reverser chain here. We need to make sure we have a 1/2 inch of deflection within the chain to make sure it's tensioned correctly. So we're going to finish up our walk around here inside the operator cab. There's a couple things that we can point out as far as filters. First off, we have our inside recirculation filter, which is up here. Simply just pull that down, and you can see the filter located inside of that. Now outside the cab, we have our fresh air filter, which is a swing down. We're going to take that and swing it down, remove the filter, and replace it as we need. To simply put it back up here, we're going to pop it back up, and we're going to swing the other up and be able to secure that. Now on the front windshield, we have 2 wipers. We have the long main wiper here, and then we also have the smaller wiper as well. Now, as far as some of the Deluxe options, some of the things that are really nice to have, if we want better visibility throughout the machine, we have our AGCAM quad cam display here. If you want improved sound systems, all Deluxe cabs come with the Deluxe radio, and you have a subwoofer installed as well. But there are other options as far as radios that you can get to be able to improve over the standard radio that's installed. We also have the ability to put other terminals, other monitors in the top here across this bar. So we have a multitude of different RAM mounts if you need for either your cell phone or an iPad or anything else you want to include. So again, a lot of different functions, a lot of different components that you can equip your operator cab again to make it as comfortable or as functional as you need it to be. Those are some of the parts as a Gleaner owner that you're going to need to pay attention to during harvest and maintenance. Make sure you order all of your parts from parts.agcocorp.com or your local dealer. And ask them about saving an additional 15% on OEM parts with genuine care. Or make it really easy and hopefully catch some of those problems before they get to the field by having a trained professional inspect your machine with a PM360 inspection. Thanks.